Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick, continuing our episode by episode recap of The Defenders. Matt, Meredith, Bibbs, Alonso. Episode 7, Fish in the Jailhouse, which does not feature Power Man villain Mr. Fish. I was very disappointed about that.
Yeah, or Abe Vigoda.
Right?
What? Come on. That would have been amazing.
It's all there, people. Come on. All right, so we get a flashback. Elektra tells Stick that Matt is not ready to join the chase, and he won't kill, but maybe they can do this without all the killing, and then they kill anybody.
I thought like that whole scene was going to lead to, oh, maybe this was actually some sort of plan that Elektra and Stick had to actually infiltrate the hand, and then maybe she could take it out from the inside, and then maybe Stick sacrificed himself, and apparently not.
No.
It just kind of sits there, that scene. I guess it was there to like just sort of show the relationship between Elektra and Stick one last time.
You also have to remember too that The Defenders is meant so if you don't watch any of the previous individual shows, it is giving some background.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's sort of like a little nugget for people who did not watch the 2 seasons of The Defenders, or of Daredevil, right, sorry. All right, so now we're back at NYPD with all of our sidekicks in hiding.
Some real talk from Misty, right?
Yes.
She's questioning Jessica about whether or not, like if they're involved, and she directly says, did you kill him?
Yeah. Saying, who are these corpses, one of which is headless?
Right, did you do any of this? And Jessica looks all pissed, and Misty says, it's not like it's completely out of the question. You've done it before. Like,
but I mean, it was Purple Man.
Well, this episode I think is interesting because it's kind of covering the bases. Because again, we have immortals, we have talk about magical lands and dragons and ninjas and all this. And this grounds it. It just reminds you this is in the real world. People are going to be confused by this, and this is hard to explain.
Right, and I do like there is that grounding because Misty says, what kind of person knocks out you and Luke Cage?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that would be a real question. Somebody would say, oh, Jesus. What's going on here?
And when Matt sort of tries to explain what's going on to Foggy, Foggy's like, I'm not even gonna try and pretend that I know what that means.
I love that scene though. It was really nice to see Foggy and Matt kind of rekindle and come back together because we needed that. Like I miss their friendship the most.
And I like seeing, because again, Misty is sympathetic. She's learned the hard way that Luke in particular is totally, trustworthy and actually deserves to be, if he says something is real, you should probably take his word for it. She's a little less trusting of everyone else, but she's getting there. So when they say, oh yeah, there are these evil people and they run a criminal organization and they're gonna this threat against New York, she's like, great, we will send the cops. It's actually a perfectly rational, reasonable thing. It's just they know it won't work. But then what's tricky is that I feel like they're engineering drama where maybe there didn't need to be some, because Misty probably would go, oh, okay, fair enough. There'd be an argument, but she'd understand. But then you have to and now here's the police captain who is technically right. Like in most situations, he would be presenting a rational, reasonable argument with a bunch of unreasonable people who insist on taking the law into their own hands, but he doesn't understand the context, and he won't understand the context without personal
and I think part of what makes the hand successful, what they do is if you try and explain it to someone, you sound like a lunatic. Well, it's the greatest trick the devil ever.
It's the Trunchbull in Matilda.
I feel like the relationship that Claire and Misty have built up through Luke Cage in this, she could have given a little bit more. She could have been a little bit more open with Misty about what's going on. Like it felt like, okay, yes, it's great that you're explaining Luke's motivations and you completely rationalized him, But at the end of the day, like, I feel Claire should have said, here, Misty, this is the baseline. I don't get it either, but like, this is why you need to not send a whole police force in.
But she does say, when there is that scene later in this episode where Claire does say to Misty, look, you started him down this path. You gave him the person, you told him to mentor this kid. And that got him involved.
And like I said, that rationalizes Luke's involvement, but I feel at the same time she could have done a little bit more to protect Misty and been a little bit more upfront about me as a normal, non-superpowered human, this is what I've seen, this is why you shouldn't get involved.
Speaking of Claire as a non-superpowered human being, I liked the scene with Colleen saying, look, you are also exceptional, you are helping a lot of people, you aren't operating at this level with these other cats, but you are doing a lot and you're capable of a lot.
Colleen actually has one of the more emotional storylines in this entire series, which is saying something. It's supposed to be about all of these characters who, in their previous solo shows, have storylines that aren't about just external threats. They are about their emotional journeys. They are about their characters and their development. And here, they're kind of spending most of their time fighting an external threat. Most of them aren't like, Luke had an emotional connection to this, but that kind of vanished after a while when the kid died.
Yeah.
We handled the aftermath, and now he's just along for the plot. Jessica is inconvenienced by the plot. Daredevil's connected to Elektra, and Danny's got his own thing. But
I don't think it's fair to say that Luke's just along for the plot, though. Because that's still a threat. There are still these kids.
It's going to happen to other people.
Like he's got to put a stop to the thing that killed the kid he knew.
Granted, but we're not really focusing on that right now. This is sort of he's fighting an external threat that's going to like destroy all of New York, and that's fine. That's rational. But James Bond saves the world a whole bunch either. He doesn't always feel like all these important things about. But I say they're levels.
But I think he's brought into it on a personal level, and yes, he gets something involved that's much larger. But I think his through line is always the personal. It's always, yeah, this is going to destroy New York, but also these are the people who killed this guy, who killed all these other people.
He's bonded with the rest of the team, and now he's emotionally invested in them.
And also,
but to your point, to your point about Colleen, I actually think Colleen's story. I'm hoping that we get to a point where we get Daughters of the Dragon, where we get because the story of Colleen being somebody who effectively left a cult and had to make that kind of existential choice. That's far more interesting than anything Danny does.
That's
right?
kind of my point. Yeah. Colleen's emotional journey here is not only interesting, it's distinctive. And there's a lot of the superheroes in this are doing superhero stuff, and that's fine. They should be. We need heroes to save us when people want to burrow to the bottom of New York and destroy it. But Colleen's story is very compelling to me, and again, Luke's story isn't operating on that emotional level. He's emotionally connected. Okay, fine, I misspoke, but it's not the same level as it was in his solo series.
We see Colleen is continuing to define herself in a way that she had let external forces define herself. Now she's doing it. She's making that choice, and it is really it's one of the more compelling characters, I think, than actually we see. It's actually almost a weird parallel to what we see Elektra go through, right? But speaking of emotion, like we talked about in the episode 6 review, there is the emotional impact to Stick's death. Like we see Matt really broken up about it, right? And as much as he was frustrated with Stick, like we see that Stick's clearly meant something to him.
Stick was his father figure after his father died. I mean, it's going to tear him up.
I have a question on something in this episode that I'm a little foggy on. Okay, when Foggy brings Matt the suit, how is that gonna make people think that Matt and Daredevil aren't the same person?
Okay. Well, no, they kind of explain it because it looks like that Luke Cage and Jessica Jones kidnapped their lawyer.
Right.
So then once he's out in the public, he can put on the suit. And I think actually that was, and I think that's actually a really great distinction there, because in the comics, thousands of times over, we know Matt is Daredevil. Like it's revealed so many times.
He was outed in public once.
He's outed himself.
Yeah.
Like I think it's so important that we keep the two identities, because out of all the other superheroes in this group, Matt's the only one who has to keep that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And to see that from Foggy, that level of like.
And to hear Foggy tell Matt, because you see, there's a moment with Matt like, this is bigger than me, I'm not gonna worry about it. And
Foggy's like, I hate that you do this, but you still need to be able to maintain these
because
two
you can't, because it matters to all of the cases that you previously.
Oh, right.
There's a practical
consideration. There's a cost to that Matt can't pay. Like there's other people that it's gonna mess up in a very real way, other than just what happens with may happen with Karen and Foggy.
And it's interesting for Foggy to even bring that up about the fallback that he would receive, because that's getting that Hogarth influence in him. Like Foggy used to be this very straight and narrow character, and now we're actually seeing him develop. Like
he's working the system.
Exactly.
He's maturing in a lot of different ways. But to that point, Matt Murdock is one of the only characters in the MCU, movies or TV, who bothers to have a secret identity. In fact, that was one of the things they did when they started the MCU, was Iron Man just tells everyone he's Iron Man, and that sort of set this path of secret identities are kind of a moot point. They don't really help anyone for the most part. Most characters could probably do without them. And in this world in which celebrity is valuable and which all your loved ones are gonna be in danger whether or not you have a secret identity, what's the point? So we kind of have Spider-Man, who's a kid and has his own reasons for not revealing his identity. Ant-Man's a criminal, and then there's Matt Murdock, and yeah, he has his own very distinctive reasons. But I think it's interesting that Foggy and Karen treat this need for a secret identity as a mental illness, as an addiction, as a problem that needs to be solved. It's not the solution to his problems. Daredevil is the problem from their perspective, and they have a point. But in the Marvel universe, where there are immortal ninjas who are going to kill us all, it's hard to argue Matt's point.
I think, and I just want to say you brought up a really great point, because in many ways Foggy and Karen are enablers. And we've seen the story played out.
Especially Foggy.
Yeah, we've seen the story played out in Daredevil season 2 of the whole like being Daredevil is an addiction. And I think I wish they were hitting it a little bit harder, because I feel like, and maybe Daredevil isn't the place to, or not Defenders isn't the place to explore this, but they, the fallout is still there from DD season 2, that they are enabling Matt, and and Matt's even said it, the more I try to run away from this, the harder it's gonna be. And he just needs to accept the fact that he's both people, which we do, we see him.
Well, that's a tricky thing too, because the audience wants him to be Daredevil. We're Daredevil fans. We think Daredevil is cool. We love the idea of Daredevil. Daredevil has endured for the better part of 50 years at this point. So when you treat Daredevil as the problem, you run the risk of turning the audience off. I mean, this happened in Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 6, when the thing that empowered Willow, making her a witch, making her come out of her shell and mature, is now treated as an addiction. And a lot of people turned on the show because of that. Or even something like The Dark Knight Rises, which argued that Batman was the problem. A lot of people didn't care for that.
Well,
Well, this is kind of a Marvel Comics thing, though. I mean, going back to Spider-Man and in the original iteration, this notion of, I think up until that point, superheroes were like, "Yay, isn't this great?" And you're punching Nazis and whatever, hooray! And then they sort of introduced the idea of like, what if this was a burden? What if this was a thing that was fucking up your life and you were stuck with it and you couldn't
which I think
unload it? Which is a story to tell, and I think that, as we've pointed out, the only person we're telling that story about here is Daredevil. You're right. You can go too far into that direction where the whole thing becomes not fun, because every time he puts the mask on, you're like, oh, that's a bad thing for your personal life. But I think it's it can be, you can do something with it.
I'm not saying it's not a valuable story. I think the trick is that it runs the risk of turning Foggy and Karen into wet blankets.
Well, sure,
and they're not as fun, because all they're really going to do is speechify, and that's kind of mostly what they've done in Defenders.
Don't go break the sound barrier tonight, honey.
I mean, granted, it's not their story right now, but like those were very interesting characters in the Daredevil stories and the Daredevil series, and here they're mostly there to talk about Matt's problem.
And that's one of my biggest problems with Daredevil overall, is they're fitting too many little stories into 8 episodes. And I feel like, as I've seen with other Marvel MCU,
you mean Daredevil or Defenders?
I'm sorry, Defenders. I keep calling it Daredevil, sorry, it's the D's. We saw this with Age of Ultron, we saw this to an extent with Guardians 2. The MCU has a problem with large ensemble casts and being able to tell like a singular story with a couple outside things.
I mean, look, like there's a lot of characters and everybody wants to see the characters, and this, yes, it's a treat to get FaceTime from everybody, but it's hard. But like at some point, it's like you get a little taste of everything, and sometimes the dramatic impact is harder to find.
This episode, especially because we've been away from the police station for a while, so now it's like this conversation and this conversation and this conversation. Like everybody has to check in and have their moment.
Right. There's. And in the police station, there's times that I think that there's lines of dialogue that are really good, and then there's lines that are really bad, right? Like when Matt says to Karen, like, "Karen, this is my life." Like, oh God, screenwriting 101.
Don't two different people tell Iron Fist from The Hand, "We're not so different, you and I"?
Right.
At least not that one.
But Matt's dialogue, like his lawyer-based stuff, I thought was really good when Misty's kind of questioning all of them, and Jessica's like, "Anyone sneak a flask in?" Right? Like, and then Luke just straight up, he's like, "They're called the Hand." Like, enough. He doesn't even ask.
Finally, I know.
Right, and then Matt like wants to pull them aside and lays the groundwork for what we see was going to happen. But when Misty or the captain's like, "I'm leaving you in a room with 2 superpowered people," and Matt's like, "Last I checked, they still have rights," which is, when you think about, I mean, they don't actually address it, but when you think about the accords that have come up in the MCU, like I am kind of interested, especially being in a place like TYT, like I'd be fascinated to want to see what the political coverage of that would be like on a day-to-day basis, right? That you're going to have so many crazy extremes of people reacting to superpowers walking around, right?
And what media does the Hand own?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, well, they got radio.
Yeah, we have
top radio.
They got radio.
That's true. Yeah, they're Trisha's boss.
Yeah, so then so after they bust out, they're, Foggy says something about Mr. Bulletproof and Super Joan Jett.
I know, that's so good.
Right, now I want to see Super Joan Jett.
My favorite line in all of this is, what happened to the chick with the sword?
Yeah.
Right.
Can we also address the most unbelievable thing that they did? Take the subway to get anywhere on time. I mean, I'm very intimately familiar with the Metro Transit.
I mean, that was a funny bit,
Yeah,
though,
it was.
right?
No, it was a great bit.
Like, I don't have my watch. She's like,
I love that bit, but also having lived in New York, I'm like, come on, guys, we know.
And we're forgetting
and then she just takes that dude's beer.
I know.
Yes.
That's so vagrant. A beer from looks like Vagrant, I think. Like, that's messed up.
Right. I mean,
you have a problem, Jessica.
Look up I Don't Give a Fuck.
You have a problem, Jessica.
Yeah.
And you see Jessica.
I love it.
We haven't mentioned also this is the episode where Elektra drags the Iron Fist down into the bowels of the earth and makes him open a wall.
Danny,
where there are dragons.
Hang on. Danny. You had one job. It was not to leave Kunlun. You messed that up, so we gave you a simpler job. Just don't punch that wall. That's all you had to do. I have not punched walls for most of my life, and you only had to do it for a couple of days, and you messed up. All you had to do was not summon your chi and punch a wall.
But
then there's no show.
thing.
I want there to be a moment in a future season of Defenders or of, God forbid, Iron Fist season 2, where somebody literally just like tells him the opposite thing of what they want, knowing that he will do the wrong thing.
Might as well.
Also, guys, look. He was both the immortal weapon and the key, all in one.
He is two chosen ones.
So his weapon was the key.
He's like the goo in District 9 that fuels the spaceship and turns humans into aliens.
Again, he's born a billionaire, and he's the immortal Iron Fist, and he's the key. What else? What more do we need?
He's the magical white man who can do it all.
Oh my God.
Also, dragon under New York City.
Dragons. Always a fucking dragon.
Turns out that's all it was. We were leading up to was there's a dragon.
Right.
I was very confused at first because when they pulled out, there was the little baby dragon that looked like his symbol. It was like the small dragon.
Was it the head?
No, but that was a tiny head compared to the rest of the skeletal body. I don't know. Maybe it had a baby while it was down there.
But apparently, it is a structurally important dragon because the second it comes down, so does New York.
We'll talk about more of that next time.
Thank you.